Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner with the City of Santa Barbara, and I'm joined by Derek Bailey, our City Transportation Traffic Engineer, as well as Chelsea Swanson, who will be moderating for us tonight. We have about a 25-minute presentation. As we go through the presentation, feel free to submit a question via the Q&A button, typically at the bottom of your screen, and we will address those questions at the end of the presentation. If you do not want to write the question, then you can also use the raised hand icon, and Ms. Swanson will unmute you for your question. And look so far that we have about 16 joining us so far on this meeting tonight. And there's a couple members from the city's Transportation Circulation Committee also listening in. So with that, I'll begin. Why is this project being proposed? Well, Chapala Street between Sola and Mission Streets is scheduled for pavement maintenance this fall. And prior to any pavement maintenance projects commencing, staff reviews collision records and traffic operations for opportunities to incorporate cost-effective safety changes into the maintenance efforts. And this process is called the Vision Zero collision analysis. And I'll just describe what Vision Zero means in just a moment. But we also receive requests or feedback that come to our office from residents, whether it's a particular corridor or intersections. And so that's data that we go through as well. So for background on Vision Zero, in 2016, City Council adopted the Vision Zero policy to reduce fatal and severe transportation-related collisions and prioritize transportation safety. And really the fundamental philosophy of Vision Zero is that transportation-related deaths and severe injuries are unacceptable and preventable. In 2018, City Council adopted the Santa Barbara Vision Zero strategy to implement the city's Vision Zero policy. And the Vision Zero strategy helps protect the public, assign shared responsibility, and reimagine a safer future for all street users. The Vision Zero strategy includes 7 core principles, provides a safety first mentality, and targets efforts for priority corridors to eliminate traffic-related deaths and severe injuries. And the core principles of Vision Zero include: life is most important, every person matters, people make mistakes, we focus on the dangerous locations and behaviors, drivers have a critical responsibility, pedestrians and cyclists are our most vulnerable road users, and the government shares responsibility for safe streets. There are 23 priority corridors in the city that have the highest number of fatalities and severe injuries. The optimal way to maximize safety in the city is to focus our efforts on addressing the patterns of collisions and determine whether there are engineering solutions to address these patterns. Chapala Street is one of those Vision Zero priority corridors. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Derek Bailey, our traffic engineer, to review what the particular collision patterns are along this corridor and how the proposed project addresses those patterns. With that, Derek, take it away.
Thanks, Jessica. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So this slide shows collision data for the corridor between 2015 and 2019, that's 5 years. We also looked at 2020, but the traffic patterns were all over the map last year due to the safer at home orders. So it didn't really paint a picture of what's been consistently happening over the years on Chapala Street. From 2015 to 19, there were 32 collisions, resulting in 19 people being injured. The highest individual location is Arriaga Street with 7 collisions, but overall the collisions were spread out along the corridor. The total number of intersection-related collisions, so at Arriaga, Valerio, Islay, and Pedregosa added together, there were 18 collisions. There were 7 reported collisions into parked vehicles, but we know anecdotally that not all of these get reported, so that number is probably higher. Interestingly, if we go back another 5 years and look at between 2010 and 14, there were 29 collisions resulting in 19 injuries. So the numbers are very similar for that 5-year period. So that just tells us that there's a pattern going on here on this corridor. And if we don't do anything and 5 years from now we do a collision analysis again, we're likely to see another 19 people injured between now and then. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this just shows a news clip from Ed Hat last year about a collision at Arriaga Street. And this probably feels like all too common a thing for many of you in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So this shows the most common types of collisions along Chapala Street. On the very, thank you. Yeah, on the very left, the broadside collisions, some people call them T-bones, where people are pulling in from the side street and they get hit from somebody driving on Chapala. 19 of the 32 collisions were broadsides. 18 of them were at intersections. There was 1 at a driveway and 15 injuries resulting from these collisions. On the right, it shows there's also some side swipe type collisions that happened in the middle of the block too. Next slide, please. So a question to ask is whether 32 collisions and 19 injuries is a lot. It's a good question. So we compared this 5-block segment of Chapala Street to other 5-block one-way street segments in Santa Barbara. And Chapala Street has the 2nd highest collision rate and injury rate when factored for the amount of traffic on Chapala Street. And the highest segment on De La Vina Street below Carrillo, that has a safety project planned for construction in 2022. Next slide. So given this pattern of collisions and the specific types of collisions that are happening on Chapala Street, what should be done? Also a good question. So based on the collision data and patterns, we're proposing a new traffic signal and intersection lighting at the Arriaga Street intersection. So that'll address the broadside collision pattern at that intersection. But if you remember, Arriaga Street accounted for 7 of the 32 collisions. So that's only 20% of the collisions that are happening on the corridor. So a traffic signal alone isn't going to have a huge impact on the overall corridor. It'll definitely make that intersection more safe. But again, the overall corridor has a lot more stuff going on. So to address collisions north of Arriaga Street, we're proposing a lane reduction. And it'll go from 2 lanes to 1 lane. This will address speed. It'll address broadside collisions at other intersections, reduce the number of collisions into parked vehicles, and eliminate those side swipe collisions that we were talking about. Next slide, please. So can 1 lane work on Chapala Street north of Arriaga Street? And so we'll start on the left-hand side of your screen there with the graphic. And this just shows a block by block traffic volumes on Chapala Street. That bottom block from Sola up to Mitchell-Terena Street, there's currently about 8,100 vehicles per day. There's a really heavy left turn movement from Chapala Street onto Mitchell-Terena Street with people going towards the Mitchell-Terena Street overcrossing into the west side. So the next block up between Mitchell-Terena and Arriaga, that has about 7,400 vehicles per day. Again, there's a very heavy left turn movement going towards the 101 northbound on-ramp. And then north of Arriaga Street, all the way up to Mission Street, it's in the mid 5,000 range. So that's very doable as far as 1 lane of traffic. And just to compare to some other streets in Santa Barbara, Anacapa Street near Arriaga that was completed last year, that has about 5,900 per day. Bath Street varies between 3,000 to 4,600, and Castillo Street from 3,800 to 4,400. There are a couple of upcoming projects planned, similar to what we're proposing here on De La Vina Street. The one up just south of Constance near the Cottage Rehab Hospital, that has over 9,000 vehicles per day. And so, like I said, this is well within the range of functioning well for a one-lane street. Next slide, please. Okay, so this shows the existing and proposed lane configuration. On the left shows the existing. And so if you just look up the street, you can just see 2 lanes all the way up, block by block. But if you look on the right-hand side of this screen there, that shows what's going to happen, what we're proposing. So that first block between Mitchell-Trena and Arriaga, the leftmost lane is going to become like a forced left turn lane to go towards the freeway. And then there'll be one northbound lane that continues on. At Valero Street, there would be 1 lane northbound. Islay, there would be 1 northbound. Pedregosa, 1 northbound. And then that block in between Pedregosa and Mission, due to capacity reasons at the traffic signal in Mission Street, it needs to open back up to 2 lanes right there. If we don't do that, we're going to get block-long queues during the peak hours. So that's an important feature right there. Next slide, please. So there's 2 local examples of lane reductions. So 2 lanes down to 1 lane. On the left, that's Bath Street with a bike lane. And on the right, that shows Anacapa Street with the lane right down the center of the street and buffers on either side. Next slide, please. So this shows the bike facilities in the area. And so as far as kind of deciding which configuration will work best for Chapala Street, the bike lane or the Anacapa example, if we look at the Anacapa Street that's shown in red right there, you can see that at the end of the 1 lane section, it doesn't connect to another bike facility. So it made sense to configure Anacapa Street with buffers instead of a bike facility, although we've heard from the cycling community that they would have preferred a bike lane, even though it doesn't connect to another facility. But for Chapala Street, shown in blue, there is an existing bike lane that begins north of Mission Street. So we think that cyclists are going to want to use Chapala Street with a lane reduction. Next slide, please. We also looked at some of the elevation gains on Chapala Street versus State Street, 1 block over. And State Street has some relatively steep hills for cyclists to climb, whereas Chapala's blocks are much less steep. So again, we think Chapala Street is probably going to be well used by cyclists, and they will prefer to use that street with a lane reduction. And next slide, please. So back to this slide showing the 2 possible local examples on configurations. Because cyclists are probably going to use this street, it makes sense to use a similar configuration to Bath on the left. Next slide, please. So then one thing we have to think about is that 1 lane to 2 lane transition. And that needs to happen again between Pedregosa and Mission for capacity reasons. This means there needs to be a transition from 1 lane and needs to open up to 2 lanes in that block approximately where that red dot is on the map. Next slide, please. And this just shows the 1 lane to 2 lane transition on Anacapa Street. It's right beside Notre Dame School. Again, there is no bike lane on this block, but if you can just imagine the space beyond the end of the buffer, if there was a cyclist using that space and a vehicle entering that space at the same time, that's what we call a conflict point, where kind of 2 vehicles or a vehicle and a cyclist kind of want to be in the same place at the same time. So that's would be the most likely place a collision would happen if we were to use a similar configuration to this on Chapala Street. So for that reason, we think the bike lane should continue all the way up to the intersection. So go to the next slide, please. And this just shows the lane configuration for what we're proposing on Chapala Street. On the left-hand side of the screen, that shows south of the intersection. So you can see that the bike lane on the right-hand side there goes all the way up to the intersection, and the second lane will open up on the left-hand side of the road. And so this is where the parking removal would be needed. And there'd be about 6 spaces needed South of the intersection, you can see the red stripe on the curb that kind of indicates a red curb. There will also be 2 spaces needed on the north side of the intersection, over on your right-hand side of the screen. And that green zone would be moved 1 space up. We've identified 1 space on the east side of the road that we can turn back into parking. So the net parking loss would be 7. We really struggled with this. We understand how important parking is in the neighborhood. You know, we hear this all over Santa Barbara that parking is important. We are also struggling with how do we eliminate collisions resulting in injuries in the city and keeping people from ending up in the hospital. So that's how we landed at this configuration. So next slide, please. So what are the trade-offs? We just talked about the loss of parking on Mission Street, in my mind, clearly being the biggest trade-off with this project. There's going to be a slight increase in side street traffic delay. Right now, traffic is spread out in the 2 lanes on Chapala Street. If it's all concentrated into 1 lane, there will be fewer gaps, but the increase in delay is likely going to be fairly minimal. And as well, there'll be an increase in corridor travel time if you're on Chapala Street driving up from Mitchell-Trena towards Mission Street, likely around 10 seconds average, but you know that could be a little higher, a little lower, depending on who's driving around you or what time of day, but likely about 10 seconds. Next slide, please. So an added benefit to the project is improved safety for pedestrians. 1-lane street is safer and easier to cross than a 2-lane street. And one condition that's eliminated is called the multiple threat here that's illustrated in this image. And it's where 1 vehicle stops for a pedestrian in a crosswalk and a driver in the next lane doesn't realize that they've stopped for a pedestrian and they blow right through. There are no records of this happening recently on Chapala Street, which is a good thing because when this type of collision happens, the outcome is usually bad, quite bad. Next slide, please. So project costs, the traffic signal will be by far the most expensive feature, likely around $100,000. The striping above and beyond what would be put back in as far as the pavement maintenance project, probably about $5,000, and we'll probably need about $1,000 worth of new signs along the corridor. And next slide. Okay, next steps. Tonight is just an informational meeting. We're just trying to get information out there to the community. Next Thursday is this same information is going to be presented to the city's Transportation and Circulation Committee. They're an advisory committee to the City Council. So it's an opportunity for the public to come and speak and be heard. And then sometime later this summer, probably in August or so, this will be going to City Council for approval. And again, it's another opportunity for the public to be heard. Construction is planned for late 2021, early 2022. And next slide, please. So there's my contact information. If you have any other questions, comments, concerns, we always appreciate hearing from the community and just want to know if your observations and is matching what we're seeing out there as far as our observations and analysis. And with that, that's the end of the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions. One thing we are going to ask tonight, if you don't mind, we're always trying to do a better job of reaching out to the community and making sure the community is informed and understands what's coming up and happening in their neighborhood. So if you can just let us know how you heard about this tonight, we would really appreciate that. And that would just help us make future outreach even better. Thank you.
And with that, I think Ms. Swanson is now on, and I believe there's probably about 5 questions so far. If you could read those, and we'll go ahead. And then if you do not want to write your question, then we can unmute you. But let's start with some of these written questions.
Sure. I'll start from the top. The first comment and question is, thanks for this information. It's a great project, much appreciated. Will this be something that can be adopted to De La Vina Street? De La Vina Street is becoming more dangerous even to cross. Thank you.
Just unmute myself there. There are plans for De La Vina Street. So as I mentioned a little earlier, there is a project planned above Mission Street. So basically from Mission Street up to Constance, where it goes from one southbound lane and it opens up to 2 lanes. We are going to extend that 1 lane section down to about Padre Street. And a few years from now, there's a crosswalk project planned up in that area as well that's going to be installing some new crosswalks. So there are plans for that section of De La Vina Street. South of Mission Street, that's a section of road that needs to have 2 lanes just for capacity reasons. We think there'd be some pretty significant queuing along De La Vina Street if it went down to 1 lane. There is a crosswalk project plan for the Pedregosa intersection, and we're trying to find some funding to do the Islay and Valerio intersections at some point as well.
Thanks, Derek. I'm gonna go to the next question. Would it be worthwhile to temporarily put the single lane and bike lane all the way through to Mission and see if traffic really does back up or become a problem? If after a test period, it becomes evident that splitting into 2 lanes in the last bit before Mission is necessary, it can be repainted and you could use temporary paint for that section. And then just, yeah, expressing concern about the Mission intersection.
To be quite honest, we hadn't thought of that, and it's worth considering. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We are in kind of an interesting time right now. Traffic volumes are down about 20% from 2019 when we did a lot of our traffic counts and data collection. So it is possible that the queuing may not be quite as long as we think it is. We'll need to do some more analysis, but we appreciate you bringing that up, and we will look into that. That may be a way to preserve some parking. So thank you. We'll definitely look into that.
Okay, thanks, Derek. The next comment, very happy to hear about the proposed light at Chapala and Arriaga. One thing that would be helpful is putting limit lines farther back on the eastbound segment of Arriaga to the west of Chapala. Buses turn onto Arriaga all day, and cars waiting to cross Chapala are often up too close to the intersection, looking to dart across, and don't give buses enough room to turn, which means cars need to back up for the bus to get through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that can definitely be incorporated.
Okay, great. The next is a comment. Bikes shouldn't be encouraged on streets where they are incompatible with cars. They should be encouraged with bike lanes, but don't make bike paths that are disjunct. Without State Street, bikes no longer have a direct route to the beach. That's just a comment. And the next is the red paint on the curb at the driveway that residents that live at 1818 Chapala Street needs to be extended. Would this be possible?
We can look into that. The trade-off with extending red curbs, similar to what we were talking about in Mission Street, is it just impacts the overall neighborhood parking supply. But yes, we can look at that. What did you say the address was, Chelsea?
1818 Chapala.
1818. Thanks.
And then the next is a comment that State Street seemingly inevitable closure has upset the circulation for bikes. Has this been considered?
Yes. regardless of how State Street turns out permanently, and that is still yet to be determined. I know there seems to be some interest in a permanent closure, but nothing's been decided yet. Regardless of how downtown State Street is ultimately configured, there's a demand to get from downtown to Upper De La Vina, like towards Trader Joe's. And the question is, what's the best way to get there? And in the bicycle master plan that was completed about 5 years ago, the route that was identified was up State Street to Padre, which is the first intersection north of Mission Street, and then cutting over towards Chapala Street, and then up Chapala Street to Constance, and then again deking over, kind of wiggling your way up towards Upper De La Vina Street, and then on to Upper State Street, San Roque, and whatnot. So that demand is going to be there no matter what State Street looks like. Just given that State Street, it has relatively narrow bike lanes north of downtown, like as you're in Mitchell-Traina Street up towards Mission. The parking lane's quite narrow, so there's not a lot of room for cyclists. Some people find that bike lane uncomfortable. There are a few blocks that are quite steep, especially that first block north of Mission Street. So we do think that some cyclists are going to find this an attractive route, just because the bike lanes will be wider, they'll have buffers next to them, and overall the street is flatter than State Street. So we think cyclists will probably cut over earlier as they're heading up towards Upper De La Vina Street.
Thanks, Derek. I have a few more questions. If I'm going to pause, there's been a hand raised. It's Naomi Kovacs, and I'm going to unmute you. And go ahead, Naomi.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live actually on on Mission between De La Vina and Chapala, so I am and I've lived there 20 years, so I'm very well acquainted with that Mission intersection there. I think a lot about this sounds great, and I think there's even some issues that it's addressing that weren't mentioned, like cars trying to turn onto that block of Mission with the 2 lanes, and I've seen a lot of near accidents with that. Anyway, my concern is about the parking spaces that are being removed there. It's kind of a complicated issue because there is so little untimed street parking in that area. In fact, that block of Mission below, on Chapala below Mission and above it, there's only one side of the street that's untimed. Below it, it's both sides, but you're taking out like half the parking. So for people who live and work in the area and don't have off-street parking, we're surrounded by 90-minute parking, by 15-minute parking, and very little untimed parking. And the untimed parking that we have has 2 days of the week where there is street cleaning for a chunk of the day. So it's already constrained for those of us living and working in the area to park and not have to stop every hour and a half and trying to find a new block to park on. So I'm concerned about what that means for us. I wonder if we could do something creative. I don't know, like allowing those of us who live and work at home to have a permit where we can park on the 90-minute zone without 90 minutes or something. So I just would like to see some attention given to the issue for those of us who are going to be impacted that way. Thanks.
Thanks, Naomi.
Yeah, thank you. That good suggestion. And just to tag on to that too, we, like I said, we did find that one space on the east side of the street. There's a little area kind of in the middle of the block in between Mission and Pedregosa that's got an asphalt sidewalk right now, and that's going to be rebuilt into concrete, and the driveways will be built into concrete. And between those 2 driveways, we'll actually be able to create enough space for 2 full-size parking spaces. So we're going to continue kind of scouring the neighborhood looking for that, though, in addition to examining your suggestion there. So thank you.
Okay, the next question. Appreciate all you do. We live at Chapala and Pedregosa, and a few observations. One is north of Mission, the bike lane has very inadequate marking. And two, cars north of Mission drive in the bike lane all the time. There's also a question, doesn't it make more sense to put light at Islay? And a comment that there is never police speed enforcement on Chapala. Sorry, that was a lot of parts, and I can reread any.
Okay. So I'll start with the north of Mission Street. North of Mission Street's going to have a slurry seal project later this summer. So all the traffic markings will be redone up in that section later this summer as part of the slurry seal. In the past, we'd use traffic paint, and paint wears out when after it's been driven over enough times. We're now using a much higher quality material called thermoplastic. It's actually got some thickness to it. Trying to think what the close sticks of Mission Street. Yeah, Mission Street, when that was repaved a couple summers ago, all the markings were put back in thermoplastic instead of paint. Normally 2 years later, if markings were put back in paint, they'd be quite faded, but you can see on Mission Street, they're actually still in pretty good condition. Higher quality markings are going back in north of Mission Street with the slurry seal project. I think there was a question about the light being at Islay.
Correct.
It's an interesting question. One of the benefits to traffic signals is we can time them for basically whatever speed is appropriate for the neighborhood. And on our one-way streets in Santa Barbara, we have most of them timed for 25 miles an hour. So if you drive a consistent 25 miles an hour down the street, you'll hit all the green lights. That's the way the new signal at Arriaga is going to be set up. Actually interesting, on Mission Street, southbound from Mission down towards Arriaga Street, we're actually going to install a sign sometime this summer up on the Mission Street, or the De La Vina Street and Mission Street traffic signal, saying the traffic signals are timed for 25 miles an hour. So just encourage people not to go too fast, because if you go too fast, you're just going to hit the red light. So a light at Islay Street would, promote 25 miles an hour throughout the corridor much better than is there right now. The issue is the collisions are happening at Arriaga Street, though, not at Islay. And so we do need to do something at Arriaga in order to address those broadside collisions. And traffic signals are expensive. Like I said, they're going to be over $100,000. So it is a pretty significant use of public funds. And so $100,000 to control speeds is a lot of money. So we are going to, or proposing to install a traffic signal at Arriaga to address the broadsides. And we're hoping that the speeds will be more reasonable with the one-lane section. Just based on what happened over on Anacapa Street when we went down to one lane, the average speeds did come down by a couple miles an hour. So that's been a successful project over there. Did I get it all?
Yeah, the last comment was just that there isn't police enforcement of speeding.
Right. Yeah, we've got a really great traffic enforcement unit in the city, but unfortunately they're really small. And so as far as maximizing their effectiveness, they spend a lot of time on Cliff Drive and Las Positas. Yeah, and it's just really hard for them to be everywhere, unfortunately. I would love to have more of them, because it would make a real impact for our traffic safety efforts in the city.
Thanks, Derek. The next is the one lane would start at Arriaga versus Micheltorena. Would this be because of the need to have a dedicated turn lane to go to the freeway, or another reason? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, it's to do with that heavy turn movement. There's enough traffic in that block between Mitchell Traina Street up to Arriaga that really two lanes are needed. It would cause some congestion there if there weren't 2 lanes. But yeah, one of them will be a dedicated left turn lane to go towards the freeway. And then that through lane will mark the beginning of the 1 lane section.
Okay, thanks, Derek. You just,
If I could add to that too, just one of the most difficult things to do whenever you're going from 2 lanes down to 1 lane is just making that transition as smooth and safe as possible. It's a lot easier, like what we're planning to do on De La Vina Street as you're coming down from Trader Joe's at Constance, where it goes from 1 lane to 2 lanes. It's a lot easier just to keep it 1 lane for a little bit farther. But it's more challenging to go from 2 lanes to 1 lane. So at this particular location, because there is that really heavy left turn movement, just making that a forced left turn will accommodate traffic quite well.
thanks, Derek. You answered the next question, whether there'll be a dedicated turn lane and arrow on Arriaga. And there's another question, will there be enough room at Arriaga for the bus to make the turn?
Yeah, and somebody earlier had that suggestion to pull the limit line back, and that's a great suggestion. And just for everybody attending tonight, if you haven't had a chance to check out our website, it's santabarbaraca.gov and then /Chapala. And that'll take you to an information page for this project. And on that page is a strip map that just shows you the proposed layout of the corridor from Sola Street all the way up to north of Mission Street. So you can get a really good visual of what it'll actually look like. And if that was too fast, email me and I'll be happy to send you the link.
Thanks, Derek. And the next question, would it be possible to make a dedicated left turn lane at Mission? There tends to be 2 lanes going straight on Chapala across Mission.
We looked at a number of different lane configurations at that intersection. A dedicated left next to a through lane, possibly even a right turn lane. What we found though is there's enough through traffic, there's enough demand for through traffic trying to go north on Chapala Street that single through lane, if there was a dedicated left and then a through lane next to it, there would still be some pretty significant queuing. So by having 2 lanes side by side, a lane where somebody can go straight or turn left, that's optimum for capacity reasons, and that'll minimize the queuing. Again, someone did have a good suggestion earlier just to re-examine that, given our lower traffic volumes that we have right now. So we'll look into that.
Okay, thanks, Derek. I have a hand raised I'm going to get to in just a second. And then there's just one other comment revisiting the 1818 Chapala address. The comment is the problem is that cars block the driveway at 1818 Chapala, and we have to drive around them to exit the apartment complex.
Oh, I gotcha. Yep, we'll look at that. Thank you.
And then I'm going to go to the hand raised and unmute Naomi. Just a second.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just the last question made me think of this with the red spaces. When they redid Mission, actually right off, between De La Vina and Chapala, I'll just give the input that they didn't repaint the red as much as it had been. And on our driveways in and out on Mission, which is already sort of a nightmare street when there's traffic, I have seen so many close calls. I actually got clipped and the driver drove away and he, ruined my window. And it's so tight to the driveways and there's so much traffic. It's really hard to see, to be able to turn out and then to make that angle turn when a car is so close to the driveways. So if there's a way to look at that, I know it's not this project, but that would be great. But regarding this project, I'm wondering if you might also consider making the walk sign just an automatic walk sign, go approaching the light at Mission from Chapala. I use that light all the time. I walk across that street all the time because I park on that block of Chapala. And I have been nearly hit a few times because I think people, when they're going through with the 2 lanes and the one person continues through Chapala and someone's turning left, they're just like thinking they're in the flow of traffic and they don't necessarily see you. And the light doesn't always change to walk if you push it too close to when it's going to change, or if you push it after the light has changed to green. And so you're walking across it when it looks like it's saying don't walk. And if you wait, you have to wait a whole nother light cycle to get across the street. So I think just having it as a lit walk sign automatically would make drivers stop and look if there is somebody walking in the crosswalk, and avoid some of the near misses, which could someday be a hit. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll look at that too. So if I heard you right, your driveway is on Mission Street.
Yeah.
Follow up, but okay, yeah, yeah, we'll follow up on that. Regarding the
and it's it's on the north side of Mission. So there's a few driveways on the north side of Mission on that block.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. And regarding the automatic pedestrian light, we call that, put it in recall, so it recalls every time. The way the light is set up at Mission Street and Chapala is there's detectors on the side street, and as well push buttons for pedestrians to cross Mission Street. And the reason those are there is because Mission is such a busy street, and it doesn't have a left turn lane if you're going eastbound on Mission Street. So if somebody is trying to turn left to go north on Chapala Street, traffic can back up all the way to De La Vina Street. To put in a left turn lane would probably eliminate a good 5 or 6 parking spaces, which we try to avoid. And that kind of gets back to the traffic signal. Is we need to have as much green time as possible facing Mission Street, so that it's constantly trying to clear that queue in case there is somebody turning left and holding up traffic. So that means that when there's not pedestrians there, if that light is cycling every time, it's probably holding up traffic unnecessarily. So we'll look at that and see if there's another solution to that. But as far as just trying to keep traffic on Mission Street going, that wouldn't be the best thing for it.
Okay.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Naomi. The next question is there enough money in the budget for pedestrian lights at Valerio or Islay or Pedregosa?
No, there's not. Normally what we would do, a traffic signal is quite expensive, obviously. The other thing we use quite widely around the city is the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. They're the yellow lights that kind of give a stutter flash type pattern. They're also pretty expensive. By the time you're doing pole foundations and underground conduit and everything like that, it's quite easily tens of thousands of dollars. And we've been kind of saving those devices for like the busier multi-lane streets in the city, Milpa Street, Cabrillo Boulevard, Upper State Street has them, kind of a block over on State Street. Pedregosa and Islay has them. So it tends to be the wider streets. If we can do a solution with paint and markings and signs, like going down to one lane, that's much more cost effective. And so that's the strategy here is traffic signal at Arriaga, and then the other intersections will be safer just because it's a single lane approach.
Thanks, Derek. The next comment is, will you do a poll on how we heard about this? Which is something we've talked about.
Yes.
So we'll look into that. We'll see if we can possibly do that during this webinar, because that's a great idea. We'd love to know if you saw the signs, if you got a mailer, if you saw it in the city news and brief, or all of the above.
And if we can't get a poll going, if you can just, even in the question and answer, just let us know, because that'll get documented.
Okay. Next question, could the block between Pedregosa and Mission go back to 2 lanes to allow for turning and then not lose the parking? This would also help with congestion.
So the issue with that is you'd have to end the bike lane. So in order, there isn't enough room for parking on both sides, 2 traffic lanes and a bike lane. And we struggled with this one too. But for safety reasons, we think that cyclists are going to get on Chapala Street, further down towards Arriaga, in order to access the bike lane north of Mission. So you'd be creating a condition where the bike lane ends and then a cyclist would have to mix with traffic, and then the bike lane would begin again. The issue with that is we'd be introducing a new safety issue that doesn't exist today. So that's what we struggled with, is what's the best configuration for that block between Pedregosa and Islay? How do we maintain the capacity at the intersection? How do we make sure that this is as safe as possible for cyclists and pedestrians? And just not doing the entire block, but adding that second lane about 150 feet south of Mission Street. Seems like it'll accommodate the traffic demands and kind of maximize safety.
Thanks, Derek. There's a comment, they agree on the automatic walk sign at the Mission intersection. And moving on to the next, from earlier in the presentation, I understood that there are 2 options for the lane configuration. 1 lane down the middle and a bike lane on each side, and 1 lane with only 1 bike lane. What will ultimately determine the configuration, at least for the first block, Arriaga to Valerio, due to the tree cover. I feel the middle lane and 2 bike lanes would be best. The tree cover on this block makes a visual tunnel, and more central lane would be better for drivers.
Can you go to, I think it's slide 13, 1 forward? Yeah. Good, thank you. So on the right-hand side, that's Anacapa Street, and they're technically not bike lanes, they're buffers, or you even call them shoulders. They work well on Anacapa Street. One of the things people really like about them on Anacapa Street, there's a preschool on Anacapa Street, and there's parents getting out of vehicles with their kids, and there's just more space between vehicles going by and parked vehicles. So the neighborhood seems to really appreciate this configuration. Although, as I mentioned, the cycling community wishes we would have put in bike lanes like we have on the left side of the screen on Bath. So actual bike lanes will look more like what's on the left-hand side of the screen. For Chapala Street, we are planning to use a slightly smaller buffer and paint a line on the left-hand side of the road. So there's about a 2-foot buffer between traffic and parked vehicles over on that side. That'll improve sight lines at intersections because the vehicles will be positioned a little bit closer to the center of the road, and just also a bit of space too, so that side mirrors and whatnot are not getting clipped. That particular block between Arriaga Street and Valerio is narrower than the other blocks on Chapala Street. Chapala Street, most of the way up between Mitchell Traina Street and Mission is 36 feet wide. That block is, I'm trying to remember, it's either 32 or 34 feet wide. So even on that block, there's probably not going to be room for a buffer between the bike lane and the traffic lane. So just don't be surprised if you take a look at our strip map and notice that.
Thanks, Derek. It looks like there are no other questions at this point, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. And Jessica was gonna go ahead and try the poll to see how you heard about this webinar. Please stand by.
Thank you. I thought I added it, but it might, unless it takes a while, I would think it's instantaneous, but
we are getting a lot of comments about how people heard about it. So thank you for those.
Great.
If we don't get the poll up, we can feel free to enter in the Q&A.
Well, Jessica, could you go to the last slide again, just my contact information?
Oh yeah, oh, there we go.
Oh, perfect.
Now I got it.
Looks like the signs on the street are pretty effective. It's good to know.
Very good. And just while everybody's voting, there's my contact information again. If you think of anything or have any comments, please feel free to reach out. If you'd like to know where that website is, I can direct you to that with the strip map. And again, our next steps is the city's Transportation and Circulation Committee meeting next Thursday. That's Thursday the 24th. It's 5:30, Jessica, is that right?
Yes, 5:30 p.m. next Thursday.
Great.
So we will have a very similar presentation, and then the Transportation Circulation Committee has the opportunity to ask questions, and then they open it up for public comment, and then the Transportation Circulation Committee will add their comments. All of that will be forwarded to City Council that we'll see later on this summer.
And if you don't have time to attend the meeting next Thursday, you can definitely write in ahead of time. Feel free to email those to me or directly to the Transportation Circulation Committee, and we'll make sure they get those comments.
And did we have information on how to attend it?
The staff report will be available end of day tomorrow. And if you go to the city's website and look up committees, look up the Transportation Circulation Committee. And then once you're there, you'll click on agendas, and then that will have the staff report there.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any new questions or hands raised at this time. So.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is one question. Would you be able to email us the TCC meeting notice? So yes, I could. That's from Naomi. I think you already had emailed Derek, and so we should have your contact info, and we can email that to you. Is there a general way to get that out otherwise, Jessica, or is it just to go to the website?
It's just to go to the website. Yeah, they're posted 1 week in advance of the hearing.
Okay. Great.
And again, if there's any emails that Derek has his email there, but feel free to share your email, and we could send links out that way as well.
And I have received a lot of emails about this project over the last few days, so I'll do my best to get back to you in the next day or two if I haven't already.
Great. Any other questions that came in?
Nope, I'm not seeing
Okay.
any.
Well, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. Much appreciated. And like we said, if there's any other comments or questions that you have that come up, feel free to reach out to us. Okay. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.